So for this video, I just want to focus on perspective, and it's one of the art fundamentals that gives a lot of beginners a lot of trouble. And there's a variety of reasons why that's going to occur. And so I wanted to kind of go over it in this one, and it's very hard for me to even explain, but I'm going to try my best to help you guys out to better understand how to work with perspective anyways. And what we're looking at here are some images that someone sent me, and they're just trying to figure out, like, how do these artists come up with these perspectives or these compositions and kind of frame these things up? Because this artist, more than likely, they're trying to get these mental images out of their head, but they're not exactly sure how to put it down on paper. And it starts with that very, very basic idea of working in perspective and setting up a composition on a canvas, perhaps, right? And so when we kind of look at these things here, they have, they're all different types of landscapes or cityscapes, and some maybe even interiors, but it's not really that hard to do once you understand perspective. And the trick here is a lot of these are using more or less like a 1-point perspective, very narrow field of view. And we'll talk about that too here in a little bit. But the main idea is that a lot of these are very flat images. So like this vanishing point in this kind of an image is somewhere over here to the left side, right? And it's all kind of like pointing, like you can feel like a direction to all the different elements here, kind of pointing in that direction a little bit, including the edge of this building. But a lot of this is very flat. Like you can see, there's not much depth information here to these rocks on the left. There's not much depth information to this building. This here, you can see it works into the background a little bit. It's actually an opposing angle, but it's going off into like a different perspective. That's because of the local rotation of an object, possibly. We'll go over that as well. But a lot of these buildings are very flat. And so you're not really doing as much perspective work as you think a lot of times in 2D digital artworks. But sometimes you might be. This one, I think, or appears at least to be more of a 2-point perspective. And you can see vanishing point left, and there's maybe a vanishing point not here on the canvas. It's like way out here to the side for the other vanishing point. So it's kind of like very narrow on one side, but it's more angled on the other. And so we'll play around with that idea as well. This one over here, vanishing points, you can kind of see they're off to the left, right? Somewhere off over here. And they're actually quite far out, possibly. All right. And this one over here, for the most part, mostly very flat image. There is a vanishing point for these buildings, kind of going off into the right, but they start to turn a little bit flat over here, and they start to come back to the left. So it's like somewhere in here, possibly, there's a vanishing point. When you're doing images like this, the artists that rendered these things up, obviously a lot of these were photo bashed, right? They kind of toss some things in here and spice it up, make it look cool real quick. But lots of like ghosting of like opacity levels and things like that. But the perspectives still work for the most part. And you can see like horizon line or vanishing point would be on a horizon line somewhere back here, possibly across the middle. Maybe this one looks like it'll be a little bit lower than the middle, somewhere in that area, maybe. Possibly. We can still see a little bit of the top here. So that's going to kind of give you the idea the vanishing point's a little higher than it, maybe. All right. These ones are going back to here and then going down. So somewhere in the middle between those two is your horizon line. A lot of times it's referred to as the line of sight line, not just vanishing, like horizon line, because a horizon line goes off like infinitely into the background, basically. But when you have buildings and stuff in the way, it becomes more like your eye level line of sight, right? Just keep that in mind. We'll play around with this whole idea. Over here, vanishing point somewhere in the back center here. It's kind of framed up. You can see with the little arch or whatever. Yeah, and the buildings point towards it, obviously, in both directions. So this is closer to a 1-point perspective than a 2-point. It may even be a 3-point, slightly, maybe. Maybe not. The thing is that 3-point is going to be the hardest to work with. 1-point's the simplest, and 2-point's like in between, happy medium, right? Then you have like fisheye lens effects, which makes everything crazier. But perspective's a runaway train potentially. And the crazy thing about this is that, like, if we don't have doorways, we don't have people in this scene at all, you have no idea how big these buildings actually are. Okay, the scale is set by certain elements within the view as well. I'm going to actually show you this one too, because we can convert a cityscape into like an apartment corridor if we wanted to, which is kind of interesting as well. So very confusing, right? I know, right? It's like one of those runaway topics you got to deal with at some point. It doesn't have to be. I'm telling you right now, if you pick up a camera that has a focus, like, going around doing some actual photography, getting on your feet, walking around, a camera lens like a 16 through 105 millimeter or 16 through 150. So you can actually zoom in and out with your camera. You can actually practice this walking around, taking pictures of buildings and different environments and stuff. And you'll learn a lot more that way, I think, a lot quicker because it's physical. It's in your hands. You understand it. In digital, it's harder to understand, or or like regular 2D artwork, it's harder to understand because it feels more like conceptual in nature. Like it doesn't feel as grounded in reality, I would say. But let's play around with this idea anyways. We'll go over just a bunch of different little sketches and drawings here and try this out. So one of the ways that you learn to do perspective is by doing a single vanishing point in mid-space. And this is a practice exercise that a lot of people end up going through, where they're told to make interesting compositions of cubes go into that vanishing point possibly. And you end up doing numbers like this all day long, right? Where you make a little square like this, and you make a square like this, and you trace out to your vanishing point. And I'm just using pressure sensitive size here with the G pen, trying to show you exactly what's going on anyways. I might have did that one wrong a little bit. And so you end up doing this practice exercise for 1 point vanishing point. And it's useful to understand and learn. But we're gonna kind of go further than this. You'll see here in a sec. So this is great, but this point is like infinitely in the background until basically everything disappears, right? And so that's cool, but what if we had, like, these were spaceships and there was like a planet back here? It's really far away. Okay. You see where we're going with that? And then we can kind of like build out the idea of the spaceship or whatever. And we could do this all day long and, pull out like a nose section or something. You see what I'm saying? Okay. We could do that. That's sure. We can do something like that and then work it out all properly. But what if this planet wasn't there, right? What if this planet was much bigger? What if it was this big, right? And they're all flying away from it. Okay, so the planet's much closer now. What if this planet was like this and they're flying away from like an orbit around the planet? You see where we're going with this? So how you frame, well, the other things you add to the image can influence like how that perspective actually looks, is what I'm getting at here. And what if this was like the planet was really close? Like it wasn't like this big or this big or this big, but it was like this big, like way out here, and it's like circling the whole canvas. Well, that is what happens when you do cityscapes potentially. Like all of these are going down towards the ground. Let me go back to the layer we were working on. I think that's the right layer, right? Yeah. Okay. We wouldn't always see the guides, right? But they would all be going towards the ground, and we want them to all hit ground level potentially. These could be buildings, right? As well. So there's kind of this weird thing that you start to understand when you start working with perspective anyways. You can have like little roadways in here. And how we do those all exactly correct, I've always struggled with, but you can certainly try doing things like this, right? Because it's a very narrow perspective at this point. Like it feels very wide angle, but like the roadways could be a little challenging, I think. Anyways, so this is the idea I'm trying to get to here, is that how you actually achieve these things is rather challenging, right? Like you have to understand the 1 point and 2 point perspective ideas very thoroughly. But yeah, same idea basically, right? As the planet far away or the planet close or the planet super close, where now we have to chop the bottoms before it gets to that vanishing point, is usually the main idea there. So rather fun one to deal with. If you've never seen that before, there you go. Now you've seen it. Now let's keep moving. The main ideas of vanishing points. Let's go over them. I kind of skipped them, but a single point vanishing point, something like this, right? Got a horizon line, and you got the roadway here that we're creating. And if we had a building on this, it would go back to the horizon, do something like this. It wouldn't usually go to the horizon, it would stop somewhere before it, right? And that would be like a wall of a building. So you constructed a plane basically in this sense. 1-point perspective, there's no other perspective, so they square out, something like that, right? Pretty easy to understand. 2-point perspective, of course, you have vanishing point 1, vanishing point 2, right? And we'll do the same idea. And we can double up the lines if we wanted to. So we got another roadway and another roadway. And then we have a building, and those would go back to the vanishing points and do this, right? And so we got our building now like this. That's just like center aligned in the middle, okay? Just keep that in mind just for now. Kind of like centered focus, if you would. So VP1, VP2, great. 3-point, of course, you have VP1, VP2. Okay. And then you'd have another one that's possibly like way up here, and that's VP3. And so when we do this one, same idea as these, except our vertical line isn't just straight up and down, it's to the vanishing point, wherever it may be. Okay. So it would be something more along these lines here. And this gives you that illusion of depth very quickly, basically. I know we're drawing over lines here, but we're not going to keep these. So the main thing is that you should hopefully be able to see this. I didn't plan on it going into the other image, but so this would end up being like this. Okay. So now that we know this, like how this basic idea works, this is where the fun begins, because now, if we had vanishing point like this, going out again. Okay, so we're trying to line those up. Whoops, I messed that up. If we make a box here, just like the building, right? What changes this box from just like a box on a table to a box that's like a building, right? That's what you're trying to do usually, is try to change the context of things, basically. On a table, there's a box on a box, basically, right? And so that would go all the way over to that one, possibly, is what I was trying to do there. So very narrow. That's what I'm talking about when I say narrow. Things become very narrow, potentially. You see? This is how you construct these kinds of things together right here. So we don't need those. And we might have to clean that up a little bit, but this could be like a box on a table now, right? And our table would go down. You see how crazy that angle starts becoming down at the bottom? It'd be like a leg. And this one have to go all the way back up over there. Okay. So this is going to feel like a wide angle because of this reason. And then, of course, we would figure there's a box inside of here somewhere where a leg exists, right? At the bottom. And those would come down. And then this one would have to come down until it lines up with this one, which is just like way off the canvas now. So little things like this start to add up very quickly. And learning to construct boxes is huge. I think if you practice anything, is learning to just construct boxes all day is extremely useful, because if we can't hit where we need to draw to, in traditional art at least, you would want to be on like a drafting table more than likely, and you'd possibly use like a piece of string as well to pin the string somewhere, and then you can draw out all of your perspectives with that piece of string, like a ruler almost, but you'd actually just mark or notch the edges of the paper so you have a better understanding of what's going on there, right? As far as like your perspective lines go. And you would actually want these to be like directional lines. So that way, whenever you're working, you can use like a ruler or your hand or your pencil or something. You'd actually be able to tell like what's what off the canvas. Here in digital, there's kind of two ways that you can approach doing this. You can use drawing aids. So in Krita, you have assistant drawing tool. There's a 2-point perspective in here. Very useful. We're not going to use it for most of this video, but I can create a vanishing point off the screen and a vanishing point over here. So I can actually set this up something like so, right? And you can see how that works out. And we can also modify it in a number of different ways. But this allows us to kind of keep our perspectives correct off of the canvas, basically, right? Otherwise, we might end up having to do something like this. But even better than this is that we would end up working smaller thumbnail size. So it's very easy to keep vanishing points on the canvas, obviously. And we could set up all of our perspective guides that we need. But our table and our box, maybe they're only like right here, and so now, like this is a corner of a table and the leg comes down way down here, maybe. Okay. Whoops, we're on the wrong side there. I'm not doing that correct. Sorry. And then that one would go all the way back up, right? So we can do these at any kind of size, basically, is what I'm getting at here. So that we can actually make sure this is all going to work by the time we enlarge it, perhaps. That's the trick. We can always enlarge things. We can always change them around later on. So later on, if we're trying to render this image out and we drew everything correctly in perspective and that table leg for whatever reason went off the scene or the canvas, you get where we're going now with this. Like we can't really trace out to that vanishing point as easy now with it like this, but when it's thumbnail size, we can. And so it's little things like that that end up happening that can be quite useful. So now we can put our big box up here, you see? We're trying to keep it all going to that vanishing point as best as we can. We're just eyeballing it now. But that's the main idea. And then we'd see the backside of the table now from underneath. So the vanishing point being down here with the table above it, we see that. But if the vanishing point was, if the table was below that, obviously we would be having a little bit more of the top exposed, right? So a little bit back and forth here. I know, so confusing, right? But anything below, you'll see the top of usually. Anything above, you'll see the underneath side of it. It's generally the main idea. So when you see these types of like really comfy looking cityscapes or concept pieces or whatever the case, this is why thumbnails are so important. You can create frames for the aspect ratio that you need for the image you're trying to create. Possibly. Like you don't always have to do this, obviously, but you can just create different little frames. You can even space them out a little bit if you want. You don't have to do them all right next to each other like that necessarily. And so that way you can use really wide angles if needed, like that, and have your vanishing points wherever you deem fit. So now you can do this like this. Low horizon line, tall buildings, right? Let's just keep them going to a vanishing point out here. You see? So now we'll do 1 point. This is something we could do, right? Not a big deal. A little bit higher. Okay. Like this is like another building possibly. So let's cut it in. I kind of did that backwards, but you get where this is going now, right? It's going to give us quite a bit of a different look if we have a vanishing point way out over there. If we had a vanishing point, make sure I can do this, in the center, these buildings would probably go this territory. They don't go like to the vanishing point necessarily, right? But we can do very narrow little alleyways too. If we go right up against it, we got the sides of the buildings showing up off the camera anyways, or out of the frame. But this is why I'm trying to explain it like this, because when we're looking at this one here, this is going to be something more like that. Like we can see the base of the building going near the corner, and then the rest of it goes way up out of scene into the background, right? So it's a little bit tighter and constricted in that way, whereas these ones are much wider, where their vanishing points might be like way off to the sides out here. This one has a center vanishing point. Okay, so all of this kind of comes into play with each other, where you can do these kinds of things, basically. And now, this, once again, is another building. We could keep working on those if we wanted to, but let's kind of just run with this for just a bit. Let's make sure these are all on the same layer for just a second. I can move them up here. We don't need these ones. All right, now let's do this. We got another frame here. I'm gonna go a little bit larger so we can play around with some more detail in it. All right, and our vanishing point or our horizon line, we won't see the horizon. We're going to kind of work off of this one. Okay, like we don't see the horizon line, but we know it exists somewhere, so it becomes like eye level, basically, how we're looking at things. Notice that these characters, you can barely see the tops of their shoulders, right? So it's just slightly below the horizon line. That's the main idea. Now, if we run with this idea, there's a road possibly here, slightly before the horizon. And this is going to be like our background buildings, right? So there's like another little roadway right here. Okay. These background buildings are layered up. So like this one's here, this one's here, this one goes up. Let's see, this one goes up. Okay. You see where we're kind of going with this? So like big planes that go outside of the image. This is the background. In the horizon, we can't actually see, so the line of sight, basically. Right? So there might be like some alleyways here, a road back here. This might be like a tunnel. There's buildings back here. Now, this is where things get interesting because what's going on here, like we start to see this, like we understand this, like this stuff doesn't exist at some point. It's just part of the composition, or as part of, excuse me, not composition. It's part of the construction of the image, basically. So we know what we're trying to do or achieve here. And if I was to start swinging these out more aggressively, it can kind of push everything forward a little bit is what it does, right? So you can see like this one I can bring down to here. And then we can, no, that would be like that. My bad. This is throwing me right now. Okay, so yeah, we can kind of push that composition to be more aggressive in that manner if we needed to. Right. So this building, we can cut. We could do things like that maybe. And all of this is kind of like where we would put our windows and things like that. These would be like sub little sections of the building, right? Because it's like buildings on buildings. And so we can start pushing walls in and out, and depending on how we want to scale this, we can make them at different sizes. So let me use doors, for example. Doors are some of the best scale references. If I make a really small door here, right? You see how it all kind of, it becomes like a different size basically compared to what we maybe thought it was going to be. And we'd have to do something similar on the other side as well. Getting the scale right between different sides is a little challenging, but there's ways of doing that by like tracing things out and lining up perspectives like this. So it's a little bit confusing, but we'll go with the rough ideas that these are the same size, okay? And so we got these doors in here. That means our people are going to only be like yay big in this scene, okay? This is what I was talking about, is that you can change the way things are based off of scale and size and everything. So if like this door was this big, on the other hand, it went above the horizon line, okay? Suddenly, this wall doesn't look so long anymore. And this feels very micro-sized as far as like an archway goes. So the archway might need to go higher. But it depends on how much height you want to it. So like if we trace out to the vanishing point, our door would continue potentially down in that direction at that height. Maybe we want this to be, like this could technically still work maybe, but it's very small. We might want it double the size or a little bit higher so that, like it feels more believable that like trucks or something could drive underneath it or something like that, right? So you want to make it more realistically scaled. So we can do that and turn our city block into something more like this. Now we got like a window and another door. You can see like I might need to try to figure out how to line those up with each other, right? But basically we got another door going now. And so our human beings being human, well, we'll just do stick figure again. I use stick figures as placeholders a lot of times, but they're going to be something like this going down this very narrow pathway as to opposed to this. If we did all these as really small doors, it looks like a very large roadway where it would have been like this. And the streetlights would be like, you know what I'm saying? So you can change it from one to the other. You see what I'm saying? You can make it a very small kind of environment or a very large environment, right? Depending on how you want to actually perceive it. And those shapes, these define the basically the scale of everything, right? So they're known sizes in real life. Like most of us have encountered doorways and street lights and stuff like that. So, you know, the sidewalk's probably too narrow now. Probably needs to be a little bit thicker. You see where we're going now? It's a very narrow pathway. It doesn't make much sense. You might have to shift this whole thing a little bit and fix all your lines so that it becomes more wide, which is really tough to do when you're rendering something out sometimes, right? So planning all of this in perspective first and setting up your composition and everything, just as a rough thumbnail sketch like this is super useful sometimes. So that way you don't make all these common mistakes as you go through that process. But the whole reason I wanted to go through it in this manner is because, remember, our vanishing point is right. Well, let me actually use the right buttons here. Our vanishing point was back here. We were already working short of that because we had these buildings possibly stopping from us getting to the background, right? Well, guess what happens, guys? This happens in hallways and corridors as well. You can think of this, instead of being a city, think of it as this is a ceiling section going towards that vanishing point, possibly, right? I did this one wrong. Let's do that. And then let's erase some of this real quick. We'll convert it. And I told you I was going to do this. So, but if this was a ceiling section and this whole back section became a wall, right? You see where we're going with this now? They would have to line up with each other, obviously. This could be like an apartment corridor, basically, is what I'm getting at here. It's the same idea. And I'm trying to preserve that vanishing point is what I'm trying to keep. So now, at the end of this hallway, we have a window. And these lines still go to that vanishing point, possibly, which I still got kind of off to the other side there. But outside that window, if we're at ground level, you know, we might still see buildings doing things like this, right? If we weren't at ground level, they would go down further like this, right? So that line would continue to the bottom. And so you can actually kind of create the illusion or the impression of height as well outside of the building by adjusting things like this, right? So, you know, if you don't see the horizon line, you'd be really high in a building. If you do see the horizon line, kind of like this, you might be a story or two high. And then if it goes up higher, you definitely be more closer possibly to ground level. You see where I'm getting at? So it's one of those things. You have to play around with this quite a bit to start to understand, but you'll start to understand the relations probably more than you'll understand anything else. So you'll know that like you want your horizon somewhere in the image and you want to have it framed for a hallway, and then you'll understand that you can work out from that. Possibly might be easier than actually starting with like the doors first and stuff. But I wanted to do it a little bit backwards anyways, so that way you can kind of see how this can play out in the grand scheme of things, because it's really quite cool what you can do with perspective. And we're just focusing on like single point, 2 point for the most part in this video, right? But there's also like fisheye lens effects. Like you can literally paint or sketch a an equirectangular map and make a full-on 3D environment out of your sketches as well. Very hard to do, but it is possible. And it's one of those things that, the more you understand perspective, the better you get at it. Think about like a glass reflective ball and you have a horizon line. It's not straight across, for example. Like sometimes they almost do like this number where they bend right at the ends here, right? That's another perspective setup. Like if we had a road in here, you see where I'm getting at? And we had buildings. This is more advanced territory, but a metal ball reflecting the whole environment, you're going to be doing some wild, crazy stuff like this. So practicing with perspective guides can be hugely beneficial. So practice with like fisheye lens effects, practice with even equirectangular, which is where I learned the most when trying to work with perspective. It's very hard to do, but it's very rewarding to understand it, because then you don't feel so lost and confused about working with just really wild perspectives, basically, because equirectangulars are extremely challenging to work with. So if you've never seen those, let me load up the composition guide. It's like an HDRI image if you've been playing around with Blender. But let's see if I got some guides in here. I was going to collect up a whole bunch of guides. I probably should create some, but I think I might delete it actually. No, it should be in here, but it's not. It's not in here, is it? Right. Other than that, like isometric's another way of working where you don't have actual perspective. Everything's flat. So you can make, this is more like mechanical drawings. So a lot of concept art is also done this way. So just keep that in mind. There's no vanishing point because all your edges are parallel, but it's very similar to like working in 2-point perspectives. So you can make buildings stupid fast and have them measured out. Grid paper, obviously, isometric, excuse me. I don't know what I was just saying there. Isometric drawings like this one, also very useful because it takes away a lot of that overhead of working in perspective. Perspective's harder than this, okay? But you can make a building like this if you really needed to, like super fast. Very good for concepting and design drawings, just so you can kind of create freely and not feel so caught up in the sauce of working in perspective. Very easy to do, right? Something else to keep in mind, isometric, right? ISO. Yeah, which one are we in? This one? Right. So let's kind of just sketch here for a bit on a new layer. We'll talk about tonal value painting now. Actually, I didn't explain focal length. I said I was going to. Let's do that. So think of it like this. You have a camera guy, right? There's another camera guy over here maybe. And he's standing on a city street and there's all these buildings on the side of him. Doing something like this. Who knows what they're doing? Okay. And focal length is going to be something like this. Let me duplicate that down. I guess we're going to mess it all up along the way. Why are you not erasing? What's going on here? We'll go one more lower. There you go. So if you have a camera and it has a zoom lens, if you zoom all the way in with it, it's a high focal length. Let's say like 150 millimeter for now, right? It's going to be very narrow like this, okay? It flattens everything out, so your perspectives become more like way out to the sides, so you're focusing only in this area, right? So that would be a high focal length. Wide focal lengths, like 16 millimeter or less, usually they go out much further, okay? Maybe even further than that, like this, okay? And if that was the case, you still have the same stuff in front of you, right? But your image feels like it's zoomed out. basically. So you get something more like this going on. All right. So in the case of these buildings, probably would be better to have a center point for this one. But in the case of these buildings, this is why it feels more like this with a wide focal length. Okay. For this one, they're going to feel much more narrow doing something like that. Okay. So more like this, not like this. It's a little hard to understand without like a physical camera. But basically, like you have your camera, you have your lens, right? Well, however the lens might be designed. And I'm talking about focal length here. We're literally talking about this part, right? Let me try drawing that a little better, maybe. Put a little piece on it here. All right, so but when you zoom in, the camera extends, right? That's your focal length. That's what I'm talking about. So wide angle lenses capture wide angle, narrow ones, or high focal lengths capture more narrow images. And as a result, it kind of compresses the image basically. When you have a long focal length, it compresses the image. It makes it feel more flat. The perspective's not as strong. The perspective's more strong with usually with the high angle. Now, this isn't always the case because if your subjects are still far away, even if you're using a high angle, they still look flat. Okay. So anything in the background here can look very, very flat still. Right. And these ones would look even flatter, possibly. So it's one of those things you got to get used to doing, is working with this idea of zoom on a camera, because that's kind of how everything works in digital as well. So when you're looking at concept pieces like this, we can start to try to figure out or understand, like, is this a high focal length or a wide angle, right? And by the looks of this looks like actually it's a kind of a wide angle, but everything's kind of far away from us, right? We could trace out the lines here and we can start to understand it better, perhaps, to the vanishing point. But a lot of times this is kind of the same deal over here. This one actually looks like a high focal length, zoomed really far into the subject. And as a result, everything becomes more flat, right? There's still a lot of depth to this, but it's not that crazy once you start to understand it. Matter of fact, this image is slightly like rotated. The artist decided to do that. So if you flatten out or you straighten out the horizon line, you'll see it's all kind of going in. At the bottom here, the bottom left is kind of working to a vanishing point, perhaps, but the buildings are very flat, so it's probably a higher focal length type of image, because these are still fairly flat here at the front, but they're just slightly angled. Oh, that was another thing we needed to talk about. Whenever you have, like, we keep going over this same idea, but basically, like, we have the building here, right? Let's do it off-centered here. Okay. And we got like a box over here. So if we had another type of box in here, basically, but what if this box was at an angle, you know? It very well might have its own vanishing point, but it would still work on this ground plane, basically. So they still go out to the horizon, possibly, wherever that might be. And so this is a little bit more confusing, for sure, but you have to sometimes do things like this, okay? Anytime a subject rotates in the scene, you get new vanishing points for that subject, basically. All right. That's kind of how it works anyways. So it's very confusing as well. It's recommended a lot of times not to mess with the local rotation a whole lot, if possible. It's easier to do in like smaller situations But when you start doing like big scenes, like lands with cities and stuff, you still might have to do it, but you could definitely start really screwing up an image very fast by using rotated objects. Basically, every time you draw a building, it's like still lined up on this grid here. A lot of times cities are very squared, so it's one of those things where everything kind of has like a gridded like highway or like city streets. You know, they're all like, you know, block by block basically or whatever. They're very simple sometimes, and but if you had like city streets that are all crazy, very hard to navigate, but for like the drivers and stuff. But I mean, it's possible that things do look more like veins and whatnot, right? Especially the big cities where they have a lot of highways feeding into it. Sometimes that happens. Like town center is what I was trying to point out there. But that's where things get a little bit more problematic, perhaps. So let's run with this idea for just a second. If we have just a roadway network, we're just going to draw it out. It's all veiny kind of roads and whatever else is going on here. Maybe there's some city blocks in here and stuff. Okay. Now we got that kind of going. Okay. And let's do our vanishing point or our horizon line at the minimum. We can do vanishing points if we want, but let's take this guy and bring it down. If I hit Control T here in your digital software, at least, you can do perspective, right click perspective. You can set up how this might appear something like this. Inside of your image. You can see they don't go to a vanishing point in this sense, right? So you don't want it on the horizon possibly. Now, is like if this road goes out to a vanishing point back here, and this road's going off in the distance somewhere over here, who knows? This one goes off the side. They're going to go somewhere to another city, perhaps in the background. You see what I'm saying? Or the beach or wherever they end up going, right? But this road would start small and narrow and eventually become bigger and bigger, become a highway, right? We can trace it out wherever it needs to go. But we can put buildings all in this area as well. Because we're below the horizon, wherever our building's floor exists, and however it's rotated or built or constructed, maybe it's got a little chamfered edge, right? We still have to construct these in perspective, basically. But because we're so far away from them, it becomes so narrow. It's not nearly as hard to do as you probably thought it would be to do. But they still got to go to a vanishing point somewhere. Based off of their local rotation, obviously. Usually to the horizon, right? Unless you're rotating it forward and backwards, then you start shifting off of the horizon. Okay. So working on the ground floor is like usually the critical part about all this. But yeah, you can develop like whole on cities this way as well by working with those boxes. And you can render it out and make it look pretty on your own. There's certainly, lots of layers might be needed for that, or depends on how you approach it and whatnot. But these are on the horizon now in the background, so they'd be really, really small. By the way, they're not nearly that big, but and then from there you can add sun, clouds, things up here and stuff, whatnot. That's your image now, right? All down there. So yeah, learning to do that, super useful. If you had a building, for example, do another one. If you had a building here, it just went off the canvas or whatever. But we want windows on this. Now, traditionally, you would actually have to mark all of this very appropriately. And that way, they all become just a little bit bigger as they go down. And then you would sketch in every window or you do guidelines or whatever, construction lines, not guidelines. Uh, and then you would have a better idea of where you need to place your subjects. So you do grids and things like that, right? Um, Digital, we don't have to do that, although it's still very useful. As long as we have a square plane, we can go to a new layer. We can create a cube, another little setup like this, a little rectangle anyways. We can Control J, duplicate these out, evenly space them, you know, and then Control E those down. We'll have a small group. Okay. We can just keep doing that basically if we need to. Actually, let me do one more. So we got this big one now. We can once again use the perspective setup, Control T, perspective and all that. This one you might have to, it might be a little hard to work with, but let's just get it going. We'll take these handles and try to squish them into this area correctly. You see, like I can line up just to the perspective first if needed. These should stay vertical from one another. A little hard to see these right now for some reason. The zoom level, I guess. But you would want those to stay vertical. These should line up on the wall. This is a very precise thing too. Like you should be really trying to be precise with it as much as you need to. Keeping them completely aligned is sometimes challenging though. At least here in Krita. And like I can back it up a little bit just for a second. Keep it going. But basically you can lay out rather complex patterns, but you draw them as 2D first, lay them out onto the surface. The downside of this is, of course, that you might have to go back and finish working out the rest of the window anyways. But it's still faster. And then you can do this again if you really wanted to, where you do like the curtains and stuff or blinds or something maybe. But you can see it all has to go back to the perspective correctly. They all have to, you know, like I'm doing this, I believe technically wrong right now, but you'd have to fill them all in, set your doors, and do stuff like that, right? So there's quite a bit of process to it. Now we can move on. We'll just do a little quick speed paint. I don't focus on the windows and stuff right away. Usually, you can use a marker. Sometimes it's helpful to turn pressure sensitivity off. We'll modify this marker real quick. A lot of guys like to use what they call a blocking brush. So it could be a rectangle. It could be a square. So if I change the ratio here, just turn squared. Sometimes you don't want rotation to take effect, so it only stays up and down, left and right. Sometimes that's useful. Sometimes you don't want pin pressure, opacity, or flow as well. And you just want to use solid colors to do your thumbnailing, especially for like cityscape. Because now we can use this thing at different gray values. We can do our line arts, and we can just end up doing something like this, use fill bucket. I mean, we can do really quick, just rough conceptual pieces, basically, of like how we want to lay something out, what kind of perspectives we want to use. So tonal value painting is huge for this, in my opinion, right? And sometimes you got to recolor things, and you can do them on multiple layers. You can do it however you want. There's all kinds of different ways guys work, but like if that doesn't look extreme enough to you, I don't worry about the canvas edges right away. I think for teaching it's good, but I'm more worried about constructing like what I need done here, you know, like how wide I need it, these angles. I'm starting to look at the angles and just trying to figure out, you know, is this going to work basically, right? And so that's all that matters to me. It's very easy, by the way, when you're working in perspective to create perspective like paradoxes or errors. You don't want to do that, okay? You want to try to keep everything done properly so that way you don't have any errors, because otherwise you end up with paradoxes or things that couldn't actually happen in the real world. like the alignment of the bottoms of the buildings, perhaps. Like maybe you need them aligned, maybe you don't. Um, but if you don't, like this is our new break now. So we got to keep working it properly, anyways. And this is just one way that you can start off a project like this. You can use just different levels of gray, like background lighter, usually. Not always. For daytime, at least, background's usually lighter. And then foregrounds can be a little bit darker. Buildings here in the foreground, anyways. But it's not that interesting in that sense, right? Like we're kind of doing the same thing I was just doing. It just doesn't feel that much more interesting. You see, like that same color even brought forward like this, maybe not the correct answer, but the silhouette changed it that dramatically. So it's like, it's okay. So you'll see that a lot of artists, they end up doing kind of like what matters most is what's close to you. And everything turns flatter as it goes into the background to some degree, right? So, I mean, what we want to do here is entirely up to us, but you do it like that. We can make it real small. And if they were really large buildings, we'd still see that. But if they go into the background and they're smaller, we'd see less of that. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a sec. Let's go back large a sec. Let's go large. So where's our horizon? At the top? So we see more of the road or more of the sky, right? Or in the middle. It's up to us. Usually a third bottom or third top is better. Something like that, maybe. Right? So that's like looking more down on people now. And just how you frame the same perspective is critical, where you put that horizon line. But anyways, let's keep going. Let's do buildings in the background, right? Like just say they're really light grays for now. We'll get rid of this one actually. Okay, come on now. You can erase. So you're going to find a lot of artists do this number where as they get into the background, their buildings become more like, there might still be angles to them. A lot of artists still will do that, but it's going to be very, very slight angles to them. That's it, max. I mean, it's not really that hard to do. And then as they come forward, they get just a bit darker, obviously. It depends on the atmospherics too, and the haze and everything else that's going on. And this is the idea of like thumbnailing in general. Is you just trying to figure out like what you got to create, when and where and how and why. Because if we had like let's turn on pressure sensitive opacity and flow real quick. If we had like vehicles in this area, we'll keep that layer. All right. You know, our road, we might have a road going out in this direction and then like it breaks here or something. Another road going that way. Sidewalks. You see where we're going? This one exists. All right. And we have vehicles in here. Is this like, how big are these vehicles, first of all? How big is this road? So we'd have to do the spacing of these things correctly, obviously. But this would, kind of like your typical small road, right? Like your vehicles would be something like this, possibly. Going to the stop sign back here. So, but then there's no parking area on the side, perhaps. Who knows? So maybe they need to be smaller. That means your lines are probably the wrong size now, too. But we could do like really small cars, right? They're all parked here on the side. Then we got the parking lane, and then we got the drive lane. And so we got cars driving in this area. Probably needs to be about the same width there, right? But maybe we make that a little bit bigger. And then these would become slightly smaller as they go to the background, basically. There's an actual way of doing that, by the way. I just never do it. I just estimate a lot of times. But basically, like from here to here, center of that would be 50% smaller objects compared to like back here, basically. So usually is how I approach it anyways. It doesn't have to be that ratio, but um, yeah, as you go to the background, they become about 50% smaller. And then every time you bisect it, basically what I'm doing is bisecting the line. So we got the full line, 50% of that line, 50% smaller from here. If I do another line, it's 50% smaller between here and here, right? So full size, just call that a 1. And then that's, well, let's just do a square. And then half that size over here, then half that size, half that size, half that size. See, it does something like that. So, but it's the way you actually get to it's a little bit more challenging because you can do like little cross sections and X's and all the way down if you need to, but that's for another day, maybe. I usually eyeball it doing what I just did. Doesn't always give you the correct answer, but if I need more precision, I'll go to 3D usually anyway. So it's one of those things you can go back and forth, but yeah, our cars now are in here, and I don't really want to draw a bunch of cars, but this is why 3D can be so good because you can actually, take a image of a car, especially if it's like a car model you bought or modeled previously or something, or images of cars or 3D models, and you can start working them out basically into these areas. Now you got your street lights. How big is a street light compared to a car? Well, that's where things can get a little bit frustrating because they're like 7 meters tall or something like that. And then a street light doesn't really work over there in that sense. So it'd have to be angled out maybe. That just might be a little bit weird, but anyways, you start to get the idea. You'd have to do half sizes, buildings, patios, balconies, all that fun stuff come into play now, right? So you can pull out or extrude a little section here and then maybe make that go up, dice it up accordingly, do some archways, make it really fancy and all that. But you take your time with this, get the shapes right, create all your construction lines that you need in order to do it. This is the magic of perspective, though, really, is that you're not restricted in any way, really. Like you can just have fun with it. You notice I'm just working with a more bold brush. I find a lot of times is really good for architecture. And you can go very large with that brush too. Like you can make it huge. You'll see some speed painting videos where dude just does like this for a building. It's like insane. Not that I've never done that, but I prefer sketching them out first so I better understand what I'm trying to create, It's just you really get like in your bag, I guess, if you would. Like you start working on projects regularly, sketching this kind of stuff out properly is super useful. So like learn how to do like architectural sketches, like rough sketches. Those can be very useful to you as well. I just found that tonal value kind of sketching like this to me has always been a lot of fun. So I just typically go with it, but because I can always take this and resketch it and make it more proper. But it gives me a better idea of what I'm trying to set up as far as like an environment goes. Like this building is like slanted backwards. I mean, it could do that in real life where it has like a big angle to the wall and there's like a little park in here and stuff. So you can work with errors or mistakes sometimes. Don't be afraid of them. Sometimes they add interest to your image, perhaps. So we can make this like a little picnic area, do little umbrellas in here and stuff, and like put a little wall. You see where we're going with that? Or little fences and dining area, perhaps. Put an entrance to a building. And yeah, start decorating it out basically. Like figure out, do you want to split it up kind of like we did the other one where it's just big vertical slabs running, or do we want to do something a little bit more abstract? This is where that shape breakup stuff kind of comes into play. Oh, you see I'm kind of off here. This should be going to this one should be going down like this. If it was running straight with this, but it's not, is it? So this vanishing point is like way over here, basically. So we're kind of correct here still if it was at an angle, I think. I have to think about that one. But yeah, a lot of back and forth, basically. This one probably could go a little bit, yeah, more this way. And so on and so forth, right, guys? This is just the way you're going to start to understand your imagery is like drawing these first, like this could be some kind of like pipeline or something. Maybe it's not part of the sidewalk. Who knows? Maybe you're trying to create factory setting instead of just a city industrial type thing. You got pipelines that go up over the road a little bit, you know? And these are like warehouses or something. Who knows? They're all beat up, falling apart. And around and around you go, basically. Like the rest is for you to like kind of understand your subject, like what you're trying to create. Like who, why, what, when, where, what you need to add to this and how it would be best displayed. Is it better, being real into the space and personal or pulled away from it and kind of an overhead view? Would it be better if we were ground level, wide angle, narrow? Then you can start to, all those things you're imagining in your head as well. This is kind of where it gets kind of crazy because the way, I don't know how everybody internalizes what they imagine in their head, right? But the way I see things is like I capture like little thumbnail glimpses of things and maybe specific details at times, but it's kind of like a foggy haze sometimes, right? Like I can see details in a building. Sometimes I can see like the overall composition, but I don't know exactly how I'm going to put it down on paper, right? So I have to pull it all together. Thumbnailing and just like speed painting thumbnails, doing very dirty sketches, at least starts to work me into the right direction. It won't give me the details, but it'll start to help me understand how I want to explain it. Like as far as like what I want people to see that I'm imagining, right? And so I can start to pull it out from my imagination basically by doing that. This is why you'll see guys constantly say practice thumbnailing, right? And it's been time thumbnailing, like what we're doing here, dirty rough sketching, thumbnailing, speed painting, whatever. Don't focus on the detail right away, but focus on the fundamentals of like perspective, composition, possibly values, like how you're going to build up that environmental feel to things. Cause there's always that value idea as well, where, maybe it's darker in the background and lighter in the foreground, or maybe it's dark in the foreground and lighter in the background, vice versa, or whatever the case, right? And, you can start playing around with that idea, with 3 tones or 3 values, light gray, mid gray, dark gray, and then start to layer in your big shapes. And then all those little details you had of all the different things you wanted to include into the composition of the scene. Like you got like power plants or sailboats or whatever the case, all these little things you can start to detail later on, right? So like sketching a bunch of cars might be a little bit annoying. Modeling some low poly cars that you can toss in here and maybe just paint a little bit over might be faster. If you have like lots of just detail that's very repetitious and needs to all be perfectly in perspective and stuff, you can still do block out models and speed paint over those. So like if you need like crazy antennas and stuff, or lots and lots of buildings that need to be fairly detailed perhaps, but you can always photo bash as well. So I highly recommend getting 2 monitors, using Unsplash or another website that you can legally use images anyways. But you can always just find images of buildings or whatever the case. You might have to do color corrections on these, but learning to photo bash is huge. Photo bashing kind of the keys of this is understanding your art fundamentals, perspectives, lighting, all that fun stuff, learning how to sketch and draw and do the art itself. But then also photo editing, understanding how to like change lighting on a photo. So like sometimes it's easier to not do as much editing, right? So you want to find photos that kind of match what you're going for when it comes to lighting, their colors. But you can usually, a lot of times at least, edit them as well and have them start to work out. So, and this process just continues at that point, right? Like I know I want that sky. So I know it's a low res image and then load up the full size one, but I want that sky in that background. My vanishing point, I know where it is, or my horizon line. So I could potentially use an image like that, right? There's my horizon. Okay, you see, buildings might be very small on the horizon back there. You'd actually, because of the curvature of the earth, you lose sight of the building at some point, but you can usually see it over the horizon slightly, but it's very, very small. You end up with something like that, maybe, just to give you kind of ideas on how to build these things up a little. We'll just turn all this dark for now, but that's sky solved, right? Maybe we look for like city road or something, right? See if we can find one that works for us. Maybe this one. This is like the bottom of it, anyways. See how the perspective there goes all the way? It's very wide compared to what we have. We can stretch it. So photo editing, you can do things like this as well. We might be able to get it back into the correct perspective basically for what we need. Or at least something close enough that we can kind of correct it. You know, we can go back over it. This wasn't supposed to be a photo bashing video, but just to give you some ideas, you can see how the lights here kind of match as well, which is nice. So eventually I could work all that back out further that way. And your sketches, right now we're just kind of doing whatever. Eventually you do it as line art usually. And if you're going to go this route, it kind of works better in my opinion, but you can kind of turn it down in opacity for now. Come back in here. And yeah, you could see like, or you can work in like different layering setups as well with this strategy. But you can start to see like it's going to become a thing basically, right? Personally, I think this swinging out like that is confusing as heck. I'd rather it not do that. And I'd rather this building just stop somewhere right around here. I think that reads better, but you gotta be a little bit picky about things, you know, like how you want to present them, the shape and the perspective. And this background's kind of like, I'd say a midish. These buildings might get lighter or they might get darker. It's one of those things where they don't have direct light on them no more. It's sunset or whatever, right? It might actually just start getting darker. It's kind of like a weird situation where the atmospheric haze sometimes makes them lighter in the background, but like they get slightly darker right before the background, like the very near the horizon. And so you can end up with a lot of situations where things go crazy like that. And then this can all be relatively dark in the foreground here as well, or just higher contrasted at least. So the lighting comes into play when you're starting to actually render things. But if you can lay it out with a sketch first, so much better, right? Like maybe a little water back there or something. And yeah, so basically, guys, that's pretty much all I wanted to show in this video. Like you can do this. It's not impossible to do, obviously, to make whole on images this way, but doing it real kind of dirty and nasty like I am right now maybe isn't always the best thing. Trying to plan it all out with very precise line work though does take some time, and so you got to figure out like your own balance, your own workflow for this whole process. There's going to be different ways that people like to work, but just understanding perspective, huge. Okay, whole idea of this video is to demystify some of those issues with perspective, anyways, just because it's something that I don't really get to spend a whole video on. I don't usually talk about in a whole video, anyways, because there's still more that I didn't even get to talk about or a demo or whatever the case. But once you start getting into this and you start understanding it better and better, like I would speed paint a whole scene together, but it would have to have that perspective right first, But it can happen, is what I'm getting at. Like this is a doable thing. You can speed paint, you can photo bash, and you can see it starts happening very rapidly, especially if you're more precise with it, not so busy talking like myself, but you can just spend hours doing this. But you'd be surprised like how crazy a scene can become within like 3 hours, right? Um, you can do a lot. You can do a lot of image editing in 3 hours. So like especially if you're not trying to hand paint it all and draw it and sketch it, and you're tossing in like different buildings and facades of buildings and on this, instead of like drawing this by hand, you'd have half of your work done for you, especially if it's in a light perspective, because then you just correct it a little bit. The rendering process is a lot of fun, actually. So I'll give you an example. I got another image real quick, very small. It's not usually a good idea to use the small ones, but you can see like this building feels off. This sidewalk feels off now because it's not lined up correctly. We can still fix it. But the small ones aren't usually a good one to use because like when they come in, they're blurry. I mean, you might as well get the sharp one, but it's not the end of the world if it is. You can always try to detail it up a little too. But you're going to spend more time on it to sharpen it up a little. Oops, not that one. The only issue is that when an image is already in perspective, they're hard to transform here in Krita, right? No, 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 no. What is it doing now? No, I want to flip you horizontal. Come on now. There you go. And what did I do? I hit Control Y. Yeah. So Control Y is proofing for print is what that does. If you're wondering what just happened there. Colors don't come out as vibrant usually with the basic printers and stuff. Yeah. So this one, you could use perspective if you want, or free, or mesh, or whatever you want. Mesh is good for when you're trying to match curved objects usually. But as long as we know the perspective guides we need, then we can actually kind of contort this to match exactly what we need, basically, right? Sometimes it's hard to see. You turn the opacity down, and then you can kind of keep warping things as needed. Whoops, I messed that one up too bad, apparently. So I'm just worrying about the image itself, not the handles. Trying to line the image up. I need to change my background. I can't see that. Yeah, so you can see a little challenging to do when they're already kind of in a perspective, right? But it's the idea that counts, right? Like it's kind of there, it's kind of in the right area. And we'll get rid of that one there. Maybe we can work this into the building somehow. Maybe. Yeah, so you can see the colors don't really match. We don't have the reflections in the windows for the... So we have to either add all that in or we can photo bash it in somehow. But it's helpful if you have a building with it already in there, obviously. Because now we're going to spend a lot of extra time just drawing, sketching stuff we don't really want to do necessarily, right? And you can add depth to them, change them. We can do the little transform tricks that we've shown earlier. Color correction methods as well can be useful. Leaving the opacity slightly low sometimes is fun. It just makes things from background pop forward. I don't think the colors are quite right. I'm not going to do all the reflections right now, but we can do HSV adjustments or curves, color curves. I think there's too much blue or green or something going on here. So we go to blue channel, click, click. Maybe we can drag these around a little bit and try to desaturate them a bit. Could do that. Or adjust HSV, saturation down maybe. Can also recolor things if we wanted to. Turn the saturation up, lightness up or down. Do levels for brightness and contrast as well. I think just desaturating it is all we need for now. Adjust levels. You can squeeze these handles to increase contrast. We'll leave that one down. We'll increase the brightness. Change the gamma value or the midpoint there. There's a lot of little photo edit tricks that you got to learn to start photo bashing. But really, you can learn these just by going through and playing with these filters a lot of times, and then playing around with blend modes and different layers. They can be quite good, and it works out quite well over time. And, you can just work it together little by little. In sections, chunks, layers, groups, and you can have like a background group. You can do a foreground group, so on and so forth. And before you know it, this is what we end up with, stuff like this. That's what these guys are doing. Exactly what I'm doing right now, except they take it. You can watch time lapses on YouTube of guys doing this. They might just slap the whole building in here and not even do like a composition sketch first, and they try to warp it into what they need it. This is more like hand drawn by the looks of it. This is another photo bash. The haze is usually like a cloud brush. I mean, sometimes it's a photo, but sometimes it's like a little cloud brush. They just overlay it and throw it in there. This guy, I'm pretty sure I've seen this artwork being put together on YouTube somewhere, or one very similar to it at least. And it's more, it's a lot of like sketching and drawing, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of photo bashing that takes place in these kinds of images as well, potentially, especially for like street signs and stuff like that. But that speeds you up tremendously. That's the whole reason why you want to do the photos, right? This looks more like a thumbnail, kind of like tonal value painting that had image texture used in it. So it's technically still a mixed media type of photo bash, but it's not the way you typically would use you would think of a photo bash. Like this is like typical photo bash technique that you would think of. This is just tossing texture onto your already drawn pieces, more than likely, so like silhouettes and things. And then you might reshade some of it, add some glow effects for the windows or something. But and then now this one is another photo bash. I'm pretty sure I've seen these ones come together. Now it's not necessarily it's always a photo bash. There are certain artists out there that completely trick me with the idea of photo bashing. They actually might just draw things like this, which is insane to me. But this might just be drawn, if I had to take a guess. And the only reason I say that is because like it looks like, I mean, there could be photos used in here, but a lot of it just looks hand drawn, and it looks like there's been a clever use of like textured brushes and things like that. So that's kind of like I'm seeing kind of like a similar texture across the whole image. It's not perfectly similar, but starting to make me think a lot of it was either hand drawn or painted over quite extensively, or at least a little bit. Some of these pipes and wires and stuff might have been from an image initially, but Yeah, some of this can be still imagery, but a lot of this looks penciled in this area, especially. So like the reflection is probably just a duplicate of this flipped down. So like duplicate it, transform it down vertically, and then you can erase parts of it to create the reflection there. So, and that's common practice, and I'm surprised it wasn't done in this one. I guess this type of swampy whatever acid or whatever it is, um, it might not just reflect quite like water, but you can see there's a little bit of idea of reflection in here. So that's a pretty common strategy to just take the image and flip it upside down and use it for reflections, right? And so you could do that on roadways too with puddles and stuff where you have the. Anyways, so yeah, that's it for this video. I mean, it was a lengthy one, an hour and 20 minutes just to talk about all that. I would love to kind of like continue working on this one, but let me kind of do another video at a later time where I might just do like a speed painting or a photo bash or something when I have time for it. And then I might just kind of like tell you guys what's going on and like while it plays a little bit. So some projects take a long time and I need to make, if I'm going to do those kinds of videos, they got to be time lapses. It's just no way to do them real time necessarily, unless you want to watch someone go for 3 hours or up to a day or several days, even depending on how complex something is, right? So with that out of the way, I hope you enjoyed this one. I know it was a long talk, but yeah, perspective's huge. It's how you control images, like it's how you control your art is by using perspective. And then once you understand how to control the perspective, you can start playing around with composition a lot easier. And composition is also very important. So, but yeah, play around with cameras, do traditional digital arts and get used to doing all the different types of arts out there. At least play around with them. You don't have to master each one, but all the different mediums and you learn something from each of them, basically, right? So don't be afraid of, don't sit at the computer all day. Get out there in the real world and get hands on with some things sometimes too. It'll help you out a lot. All right, I'll check you guys out in the next one. Take care.